Opening shot. Veterans Day is a time to reflect on all the sacrifices from America's men and women in uniform. But one can't help but wonder why so many veterans still fall through the cracks of American society. According to the National Coalition for Homeless Veterans, an estimated 32,882 veterans are currently experiencing homelessness in the U.S. That represents about 5% of the national homeless population on any given night. And according to the VA, there were 6,407 veteran suicides in 2022. That's the latest year for which data is available. Now, veterans have a 58% higher risk of suicide than the general non-serving population. So today I had the good fortune of moderating a discussion with retired four-star General Stanley McChrystal, who until 2009 commanded the Joint Forces in the war in Afghanistan. He recalled the day he was called to the White House and had to offer his resignation to then President Obama. After 38 years in the service, McChrystal says he truly struggled to understand who he even was anymore.
It's not easy. You are constantly, particularly in the early days, there are times when you don't sleep at night. You're just either so angry or you're so upset or you just think, I'm so embarrassed. Because that was the overriding thing. I was humiliated to leave command that way. And I felt like I'd let down all the people who were serving with me. I just suddenly disappeared from Afghanistan, and I write handwritten notes to a bunch of them, but I just deserted my post. And it's hard, but it gets easier over time. It's almost like every day it gets a little easier.
Other veterans no doubt can relate to these existential struggles once leaving service, which is why a local nonprofit based in Park Ridge called the Veteran Business Project aims to equip new civilians with the tools to become an entrepreneur and matches them with folks that want to sell business so they can own their own business. Now, co-founder Charles Lynn Lauder says there are a few better ways to circumvent all of these dark paths and few better candidates as qualified to run businesses as service members.
We have become absolutely convinced in the power of entrepreneurship, veterans getting in business for themselves, so that they, just like World War II, they can create a future for them and their families. They can very importantly develop hope. Hope being the last thing that leaves a veteran before they take that unfortunate choice.
So on this Veterans Day, a heartfelt thank you all for your service. Let's hope we can someday repay the sacrifices you've given for all of us.
Tonight, a city alderman gets in Governor Pritzker's face over the employee head tax. He'll tell us what he told the state's chief executive. A GOP candidate running to replace Dick Durbin in the U.S. Senate. We meet Republican Don Tracy. And lessons from a life in service. On this Veterans Day, we visit with retired four-star General Stanley McChrystal. He weighs in on the prospect of U.S. Armed Forces on American streets.
Welcome to the Chicago Report. I'm Paris Schutz, and happy Veterans Day to everyone. The shutdown is over, the federal government shutdown that is, and everyone who's traveling for the holidays can breathe a sigh of relief, right? Not so fast, says U.S. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy. He was at O'Hare this afternoon reminding folks it's going to take a few days for the system to catch up, but even when it does, there will still be a shortage of air traffic controllers.
We now have 15 to 20 air traffic controllers retiring a day. So that's a problem. Long after you all finish covering the shutdown, we are going to be stuck dealing with this problem where we're about 2,000 controllers short, trying to make up that difference. I'm supercharging our air traffic control school, our academy, getting more young people to come in. From the time they apply to the time they get into the academy, I've truncated that. I'm paying them a bonus to come to the academy.
Now, Duffy says all federal aviation workers should see 70% of their lost pay immediately in the next few days. The rest will eventually be deposited. The other big story today, multiple reports saying Operation Midway Blitz will dramatically scale down in the coming days, and controversial leader, Customs and Border Patrol Commander Gregory Bovino, will be relocated out of Chicago. Now, Governor Pritzker says it doesn't mean the city is out of the woods.
Whether it was the loss in the elections a week ago that's led to Donald Trump deciding to pull CBP out, or the fact that Greg Bovino is a snowflake on a day when you can see some snowflakes. Whatever it is, the people of Chicago have deserved better than having CBP and Greg Bovino in this city. But I would not say that we're now going to be free of these terrorized neighborhoods, because ICE and CBP probably will still be here, though they will have fewer people, and we'll have to continue to protect our neighbors and our friends and our families.
And check out what happened right after the press conference. 25th Ward Alderman Byron Sigcho-Lopez confronts the governor about his opposition to Mayor Johnson's proposed employee head tax.
I want to talk about what we need to do to help our community.
What we need is a progressive income tax, a graduate income tax in the state.
And what is going to happen? Yes.
Yeah,
or the surcharge.
You know that I've worked very hard to get that passed when I first got elected.
Yes, I mean, listen, and you got one more second. Wait, no. One more second. No.
And joining us now with more are Alderman Sigcho-Lopez and 34th Ward Alderman Bill Conway. Welcome, both of you. Alderman Sigcho-Lopez, this was a press conference for veterans. Why confront the governor on the employee head tax?
Well, we today remember veterans like Miguel Perez Jr., a personal friend who was deported to Mexico. It is important that we know that there are immigrant veterans that are serving. And I'm grateful for Governor Pritzker to pardon him so that we can continue helping and protecting our community. The fact of the matter is that Trump and his cronies want chaos in our city, and we need to tax those billionaires and corporations who got in $1 trillion of benefits from these crooks while our communities are starving. They're literally people who cannot go to school, cannot go to school, cannot work. And in a moment like that, it is critical that we also talk about how we're going to prevent the chaos and violence that Trump wants in our city. And that means that we need to charge the rich, the corporations, the people who don't pay taxes while our communities are being terrorized, and these mercenaries get bonuses. So it was important that we discuss that. I think in what you show in the video, I don't know if Alderman Rodriguez heard me or what I was talking about. I do think that is important that we have these conversations, as we should, as elected officials.
Alderman Conway, do you believe the city should have this conversation with the governor, and do you believe that was the right way to approach it?
Well, first of all, Paris, I want to thank you for honoring veterans with your coverage tonight. That's certainly meaningful for me as a veteran and all those who served. When I think about the fiscal situation we find ourselves in this city, we really need to grow the size of the city, and that's going to require housing, and that's going to require jobs. And I think putting a jobs tax on will in fact do the opposite of that, and tax the behavior that we're trying to create. Additionally, we have to be honest about the numbers. I know the mayor and his allies say this will hit 3% of companies, but in reality, it's going to hit a third of our private sector workforce if you do the math on that.
Alderman Sigcho-Lopez, what about the concerns around the employee head tax, let's say, because that's been the most controversial proposal so far in the mayor's budget, that it will discourage businesses from operating in the city?
Look, the fact of the matter is that corporations like McDonald's, Google, some of them are actually complicit in what is going on in our country. They are complicit in how they are funding terror against our community. So they should pay their fair share. This is a tax that was unfortunately given as a giveaway for the corporations by Rahm Emanuel, a mere 1%. And this is why in our community we need to tax corporations and billionaires so we can survive this shameful attack. It is important. I think we come from very different communities. Alderman Conway and I come from very different communities. The realities of our communities are vastly different. So what we're asking, if we don't want to charge billionaires and corporations, then who do you want to make sure that they pay the blunt? Are those the same average working class families, those veterans that we're supposed to honor, to make sure that we address the issue of homelessness, the issues that we have in our communities? I mean, the veterans who need mental health, the veterans who need health services for housing. So how are we going to address that when we're not talking about new revenue? And new revenue cannot come by more property taxes as it has come year after year. It has to come from those corporations and rich people who don't pay their fair share and getting a lot of tax breaks by the dictator-in-chief.
Alderman Conway, new revenue will likely have to come from somewhere with a $1.15 billion gap. If it's not going to be the employee head tax, what do you think it's going to be?
Well, I think it is important that before we ask the taxpayers for more money, we are looking at what we can do to make city government more efficient. I mean, the mayor's office and city taxpayers paid Ernst & Young for a report, and we just don't seem to be following their recommendations on taxpayer savings. Instead, we're adding fees on social media, adding fees on jobs, adding fees on Ubers, instead of looking at the savings that Ernst & Young put forth regarding fleet optimization and real estate savings and other things.
Yeah, Alderman Sigcho-Lopez, there was this hearing yesterday. Ernst & Young was paid $3 million to come up with ways to cut some costs, and it came up with up to $1.4 billion in cuts. The mayor's gotten some criticism for only incorporating about 80 million of that. Why not incorporate more?
Because in a time where our city is facing a tremendous attack by the federal government, we have to fight in court to get the funding that we are paying the federal government. And in a time like that, when, and I hear Alderman Conway, wants to make sure that we address the issues of homelessness, the issues of mental health, the issues that also affect veterans, immigrants, and Chicagoans alike. We cannot cut services. I think that is important, and that's what I talked to the governor today. I went to Springfield. I think legislators should go to Springfield to talk about, for instance, how inequitable the formula is. When we pay every dollar that we pay to the state, we only get 80 cents back. So let's talk about that, and let's make sure that, yes, and I think the recommendations do incorporate efficiencies, but not to the point to defund critical services like housing, like mental health, like services that are vital for our city. So yes, we agree that there should be efficiencies. For instance, in the Chicago Police Department, where there's tons of waste, tons of overtime. That's what the report said. Also recommends that there's a lot of overtime that is misspent. There's a lot of misconduct. There's a lot of funding that we should be absolutely saving. So I agree with some of the recommendations from the report, and we should implement it.
What about the police department, Alderman Conway? Overtime has always kind of ballooned beyond what was budgeted. All the payouts because of police misconduct. Is there money to save in the police department?
Well, I first also want to acknowledge what my colleague said regarding Springfield. I don't think building a better relationship with Springfield will come from physically going after the governor and also our colleague Mike Rodriguez, who's been pretty close, pretty out front on behalf of his community in Little Village. I mean, heck, the guy was hit by a flashbang a few days ago. But I do think that, I think like every department, we need to be looking for efficiencies in the Chicago Police Department. And I think some of the ideas of keeping a tighter rein on overtime spend absolutely have some merit.
Alderman Sigcho-Lopez, I do want to go back to that confrontation with the governor, because the governor was basically saying, look, I tried to get the progressive income tax. It didn't work. The voters didn't go for it. Were you satisfied with some of the answers he gave you?
Well, I mean, you heard the conversation, right? I mean, the progressive income tax is something that's not going to materialize overnight. We need to create new revenue. And we also need to talk about, the other thing that is missing. And again, nobody assaulted the governor. I'll tell you, he in fact stopped to talk. And I give him credit for that. You can see in the images, I think some people who didn't hear the conversation got in the middle, but I want to correct my colleague. Nobody assaulted the governor. I think people in my community has been assaulted, including minors. That is very clear. So I tell you that it is important in a moment like this that we as legislators talk about also the one thing that is missing there that asks is about state police arresting protesters, but not asking for judicial warrants from people who come to terrorize us. I think that these are very valid questions. We talk about veterans. They have fought for our constitutional rights, including our First Amendment rights, the First Amendment right to speech. And that is so important that we protect today. The conversation with the governor was a conversation as we have as legislators. I don't know what my colleagues heard, but this is exactly the conversations that we must have. The only people assaulted were people in my community, including minors.
What today, Alderman Conway, shifting gears a bit, these reports that Operation Midway Blitz, these deportation efforts are going to ramp down a little bit. We haven't gotten confirmation of that. Do you? What do you feel about these reports?
Well, I hope they're accurate. We've certainly seen some disturbing behavior by ICE in the 34th Ward, from some sort of military-like show of force on Michigan Avenue, all the way to in front of an elementary school in my World Language Academy. A woman was forcibly pulled out of her car by 6 ICE agents and zip-tied on the ground while you have elementary school students yelling in the background, "It's ICE, it's ICE." And I had to go spend some time with those parents, obviously, regarding the trauma that happened in that community. So I hope these reports are accurate, and I'm sure my colleague and I agree on that, as do many of my colleagues in City Council.
All right, Alderman Byron Sigcho-Lopez of the 25th Ward and 34th Ward, Alderman Bill Conway, on that budget. I know you got some more sausage to make here before the end of the year, so we'll keep following it. Thanks for talking to us tonight.
Thanks for having us, Paris.
Thank you.
You got it. And when we come back, we meet a GOP candidate for U.S. Senate from Illinois.